Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Nelson, here on this Friday evening, and we are going to be talking about, in the first segment, we're going to be talking about Bronny James and his decision on the NBA draft. He posted it recently on Instagram, so we're going to go ahead and look at that. And then in the second segment, we are going to be covering the Final Four for both the men's side and for the women's side, because now there's enough games that I'm able to cover both sides. I usually only covered the men's side, but now that the women's side is sort of gaining that traction and gaining that popularity, I'm able to bring that up in the second segment. And then in the third segment, we're going to do a quick recap of all the NBA action that went down last night. We also have a fourth segment that I reveal later on after the third segment, so stay tuned for that to figure out exactly what it is. And before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please use the link in the description or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment to get your comments recognized. Once again, that is GSMCPodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, it is GSMCPodcast.net. And with all of that out of the way, let's go right ahead and talk about Bronny James and his decision. Now, about a week ago, over the previous week, I should say, there was a rumor that Bronny was going to enter the transfer portal, but the decision wasn't final. Those were just rumors. Bronny never said it directly, and neither did LeBron, neither did anyone that is associated to Bronny. It was just assumed, I guess you could say, because given how Bronny isn't really high in, the draft stocks, it doesn't really seem, he didn't really play that well in college offensively. I thought he played very well defensively. It doesn't really seem like teams were going to draft him at that point. But after the end of the week, Bronny posted on Instagram that he announced that he is officially declaring for the 2024 NBA draft. And at the same time, he's also going to enter the transfer portal. Now, I've never seen any college player do this, at all. I've never seen them declare for the draft and at the same time, go to the transfer portal. I didn't even know that was possible because, usually when you declare for the draft, it's not really, you're declaring for the draft and you don't intend to go back to college. And I had no idea that college players and college students had that option to both declare for the draft and at the same time enter the transfer portal if necessary. I thought it was you declare, you either make it or break it, and then you figure out what you have to do with the rest of your life. And I had no idea that. I didn't expect Bronny to take this approach, but I do think it is the smartest move that he could have done. If he could have done anything with the decision of either picking, getting drafted or staying in college, it was really difficult to choose between one or the other, because now that college students are getting paid, he can bring up his name, image, and likeness deals while still in college. But, the money that you make over on them, in the NIL deals, is probably, it pales in comparison to the money that you can make on an NBA contract or an NBA rookie contract, depending on who you are, of course. Because, different athletes, they get different NIL deals, and they provide different incentives. And usually the players that are really, really good are the ones that end up making the big money, like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and all of those other players. You don't really... What's kind of ironic is that you don't really hear many of the men's basketball players getting, at least on the college aspect, getting really big deals on name, image, and likeness. It's more so on the women's side than on the men's side, or at least the women's side is better advertised, I guess you could say. And I honestly think that either or, the move would have been if he would have picked one or the other, it would have been good. So the fact that he was able to pick both, I think it's one of the smartest things I've ever seen a college student do, because, again, I had no idea anyone could even do that. So I'm just looking at the social media posts right now if there's anything else that I need to discuss about it. And no, so all that's left is waiting to see what team he is going to pick, what team could either draft him or what college he's going to end up making his decision to go to. So looking at like the possibilities for the colleges, it's alleged that he's going to transfer to an Atlantic 10 program. Now, which Atlantic 10 program it is, we have no idea, but that's sort of like what the speculation is right now. And in terms of NBA, obviously, like, the team that's most likely going to draft him is probably the Los Angeles Lakers, because as we all know, LeBron, he really wants to play with his son Bronny, and that's sort of been the goal since LeBron has found out he's old enough to sort of be able to get that chance. And obviously, I feel like Bronny wants that chance as well, which is why he did both declare for the NBA draft as well as decide to go into the transfer portal. So whichever one he decides to do, not entirely sure. And also, like, if an NBA team drafts him, like, what other team other than the Lakers would draft him? Because, as I said previously, offensively, his game, it wasn't there, and it wasn't where we expected, I guess you could say. And I feel like what we expect from a freshman college player is different than what we expect from LeBron's son, if that makes sense. Because obviously, like, with LeBron having a son, everyone assumes that, like, he's going to have the same skill set or maybe even be better than his own father, simply because, like, his father is the one who teaches him, and it's like he's also able to learn from everyone else in a game that's expanding. And that's sort of the anticipation that, like, oh, he's going to dominate in college, he's going to be great in college. But I feel like a lot of people forget that he did suffer heart problems to begin, like, the NCAA season. Well, not really to begin the NCAA season, but, like, sort of before that. And that, obviously, like, having heart problems, it's not ideal. And the fact that he was able to return to play college and play in all of these games, I think it's an accomplishment in of itself. And most of the fans and most of the media is being a little bit too harsh on their expectations, because Bronny, he has some phenomenal defense for a college freshman. Like, that is definitely the highlight of his game. And when you look at LeBron's son being just a good defender, it doesn't really sound right, and it sounds a little disappointing. But when you look at a college player being just a defender, it sounds very impressive. And it's something that a lot of teams value, especially when they're drafting, because a lot of teams would love to have that role player that plays great defense and is athletic and is good enough to shoot. So that's the value that I see Bronny bringing to any NBA team that decides to draft him. I do think that, like, if any team was to draft him, it's going to be the Lakers off of just skill set alone. Like, however, there's also the thought process that LeBron, he's recently said that he is not sure how much longer he's going to be able to play in the NBA, and he thinks like 1 or 2 years is going to be like the max at this point in time. So depending on what team drafts him and their cap space, there might be a chance that they might try to pursue LeBron to join them in hopes of playing with his son in his final 2 years of playing in the league. So the reason why teams would draft him would be because they want LeBron on their team. And I said this previously on like the last episode of the podcast, that if teams are going to draft Bronny, it's most likely going to be because they want LeBron James on their roster, because LeBron is still playing some of the best basketball of his entire career. He's shooting better than Steph Curry from the three-point line, and there was a stretch where he only missed 6 shots in 2 games. That is phenomenal basketball, especially coming from the oldest player in the NBA right now. And obviously, teams still want that value, and I feel like some teams might think, oh, we could definitely get him if we get Bronny. And I wouldn't be surprised if, like, I'm not entirely sure if the Lakers are going to even entertain that idea. And I'm also not entirely sure if LeBron will request a trade to that team if the Lakers decide to entertain that idea. Because LeBron has never in his entire career requested for a trade. So, like, most people, like, they think, like, oh, LeBron James, he abandons his team and things of that nature. He doesn't abandon his team. If he really wanted to abandon his team, he would have requested a trade. But he clearly doesn't want to do that. And he's never done that before, so I don't really expect him to do that now. But given how he really wants to play with his son, I'm not leaving anything off of the table because anything is possible, and it's a crazy league that we're in right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if LeBron just says, all right, it's time to adapt, and decides to abandon ship and go to a different team just to play with his son if he doesn't have another chance of winning a championship, or if the Lakers don't have another chance of winning a championship, which is honestly kind of ironic given how at the start of February, the Lakers have been, I believe, 20-3, and they have not moved an inch from the 9th seed, which is insane to think about because it's like you win 20 games and it's not even enough to bring you up one spot in the seedings. That is really crazy. Now, looking at the seedings right now for the Lakers, I believe that since they still hold the 9th seed, I'm going to see just how many games, like, is the difference between them and the Phoenix Suns and the Kings and all of those other teams that are fighting for a playoff spot and trying to avoid the play-in right about now. So if the website would load, that would be fantastic. Now, just looking at the standings real quick. And yeah, so right now they have the exact same record as the Kings. The Kings have one less loss than them, so they're expected to play tonight. And we'll see exactly what that's going to do to the standings. The Phoenix Suns, they moved out of the 7th and 8th seed, and they moved all the way up to the 6th seed. So now the play-in tournament is looking like Pelicans going up against the Kings and Lakers going up against the Warriors. So dependent on how the season ends out, there might be a chance that the Lakers could make it to that 6th seed. There's a small chance that they could do that. And if they do that, their playoff chances are just that much greater, depending on who they go up against in the first round. Like, the 1, 2, and the 3 seed are flip-flopping, same as the 7, 8, 9, and 10 seed are flip-flopping. And that's going to ultimately determine the matchups and who makes it out of that playoff picture. Now, if the Lakers, they end up winning and they end up having a long playoff run like they did last year, maybe LeBron would be less incentivized to leave the Lakers even if another team drafts Bronny. And if that's the case, then maybe Bronny's draft stock would take a hit. Now, if the Lakers, they lose out in the first round immediately, then there might also be a chance that LeBron just decides, like, there's a much higher chance that LeBron decides to leave. Because the Lakers, like, I don't want to, you know what, I'm going to be that guy. The Lakers, they have completely wasted LeBron's prime. They've wasted it more than Cleveland has wasted his prime. I am sorry to say, that is just how it is. The Lakers front office and their managements of the roster, it's been very, very bad, and a lot of people blame LeBron for it, but I understand that LeBron, he has a lot of executive action over the Lakers, but it's the Lakers that end up making these decisions, and they can choose whether to listen to him or not. And the fact that they go through with some of these decisions actively just makes the team worse. Like, missing the playoffs with a prime LeBron is inexcusable, and they've done that more times than the Cleveland Cavaliers have done that, and it's egregious to me. Like, I don't understand what that is. But that's the update on Bronny and his situation. So with that, we are out of time for this first segment. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the second segment where we pivot to NCAA basketball, both on men's and women's, and talk about the Final Four and their matchups. So I will be right back after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back to the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we're going to be pivoting to NCAA basketball and college basketball, both on the men's side and on the women's side, about like the Final Four matchups and what is to be expected. And we have a comment coming in from Corrido MVP11. He says he's been watching 2 reaction channels that show no class to Warriors fans, and they love to talk now. They love to talk. Now Warriors are winning. They're ducking. I don't know what to say. And I wasn't ducking the Warriors, and I wasn't going to duck the Warriors, so just wait until like the third segment, and then I'm definitely going to talk about them and their recent matchup against the Rockets in the NBA recap. But before we go do that, I want to get through to the college aspect of basketball. And before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please use the link in the description or the link displayed below the ticker to get your comments recognized. Put your comments directly in front of my screen. The link is GSMCPodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCPodcast.net. And with that out of the way, let's go right ahead and talk about the Final Four matchups. And Corrido in the chat, he says, I was not talking about you. You're you're very classy guy. I like you for that. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And so, I mean, like, I always feel like talking, for lack of a better term, talking trash about NBA players. I feel like it's very hypocritical because they're doing things on the basketball court that we only dream of doing. Like average people like us, they're doing things that we cannot do no matter how hard we try. And I feel like just discrediting that is disrespectful, it's disrespectful just to the players. And it's like everything that they've been through and everything that it took them to sort of get to the point where they're at. And like, again, it's like, it's disrespectful because it's like, I mean, who knows what I would have done if I was in their shoes. And it's a lot of pressure being an NBA player, and it's a lot of pressure being a basketball player in college as well. So I feel like talking down on some of these players is just disrespectful. Unless it's Ben Simmons. He deserves every single inch of... That's just me. But you guys know why I don't like Ben Simmons. His frame, his height, everything about him, it just screams basketball player, and he doesn't want to play, and I don't understand why. But that's a little bit of he has more to say in the chat. Plus, most fans use hindsight, and hindsight is always 20/20. That's also very true, because it's like people they usually look at the now, and they don't look at everything as a whole. And again, it's like, it's really disrespectful, especially like if the player ends up losing. Like, fans expect these guys to be perfect, and nobody is perfect. No matter how hard they try, no matter how hard they want to be, nobody is perfect. Unless you're like a LeBron fan and you think LeBron James is perfect. But I'm not one of those fans. But regardless, let's go into the matchups going into the Final Four. For the men's, they're happening tomorrow, For the women's, they're happening tonight. So, you know what? Why not? Let's do the women's first. So, ladies first, right? So, tonight, South Carolina is expected to go up against North Carolina in the Final Four. South Carolina has yet to lose a game this season, and I expect that trend to sort of continue going into this matchup. I don't see South Carolina losing to North Carolina. I think that South Carolina's roster and their star power is good enough to make it really far and to make it all the way to the finals. So I do not see South Carolina losing this game. And like it's again, this roster, they've been flawless in the regular season for 2 straight years. And that doesn't happen on accident. They didn't end up winning the championship last year. But that's all right. Like, I mean, no one is perfect. And I feel like that loss has sort of, it gave that team a drive to want to prove everybody wrong. Because they already stunned the world being 36-0. And that brings a lot of pressure. Doing it again, it brings a lot of less pressure because it's like, you've done this already and you've done this before. Now the real pressure comes into winning, and I feel like they're much more motivated to win now than they were last year. And I think that's going to play a part in this matchup. Now, in the next matchup, Iowa is going up against UConn, and this is probably going to be one of the most watched women basketball games in history. And Iowa going up against LSU in the Elite Eight, that was the most watched women's college game ever. And it destroyed, I'm just pulling up the stats right now just to see like the exact numbers of like that game and the exact viewership of that game. So for reference, LSU going up against Iowa, it outdrew every single NBA game in the last season except for Game 5 of the finals, every college football game last season outside of college football, Ohio State going up against Michigan, and the SEC championship, and every MLB game last season. So it was able to draw in more attention than all of these really big and highly anticipated men's sports games. And being able to do that is astonishing for women's basketball. And I think it's great for not just women's basketball, but for women's sports in general, because this is bringing much more awareness to all of these women athletes, because it's like, oh, these women athletes, they're tough too. So let's watch the women play this sport. Let's watch the women play that sport, this, that, and the other. I think this is great for women's sports in general, and it's definitely a long time coming. So back to the matchup in of itself. Iowa going up against UConn. I think that this is where Iowa's road ends. I think UConn has a better team as a whole overall and is better coached than Iowa, because when I look at Iowa, it's usually dependent on Caitlin and how well she can lead her offense. And obviously, like defenses, they have a really difficult time stopping her, so how could you blame them? But with UConn's side, they also have a really dominant player in Paige Buchers, but on top of having Buchers, they also have a better team as a whole. So I think the scoring between Buchers and Caitlin Clark is going to cancel out, and the matchup is ultimately going to be determined by which player coming either off the bench or in the starting 5 is going to make that difference. And I feel like UConn has a better chance of having players that are able to make that difference and are able to outduel Caitlin. Then again, this is Caitlin Clark we're talking about, so there's a possibility that she just says, you know what, forget the odds, I'm going to shoot every 3 in your face, and there's nothing you can do about it. Because that's just the player that she is, and that's just how dominant she is in the game. And wouldn't be surprised if Caitlin just shoots, and everything goes in. Just because that's just the player that she is. So that's the women's side. Now we're going to go talk about the men's side. I mentioned previously, like in a previous podcast, that this was the first time that in NCAA basketball history that 2 college programs have been able to make it to the Final Four in both the men's and the women's side. And both of those teams are North Carolina State and Connecticut. They don't match up against each other, however. So North Carolina State is expected to match up against Purdue, and there's a very anticipated matchup between DJ Burns and Zach Edey, and I feel like the game is ultimately going to be decided on which of those players outduels the other. And, like, I feel like that's where the biggest chances are. Like, that's ultimately going to decide the game, like, depending on who, like, outplays the other and by how much they outplay the other. But Zach Edey, he might get outplayed by DJ Burns in that battle. But the Purdue team, it seems to be good enough to be able to, like, to be able to score if Zach Edey isn't scoring. I mean, last game, Zach Edey, he dropped like 40 and 22 rebounds. Excuse me. So maybe he's going to, I don't expect him to have that exact same dominant performance coming into this game. I feel like DJ Burns can guard him rather well, but usually the defensive game plan when going up against Purdue is to double Zach and force him to pass the ball and force the other players to shoot. And my faith in Purdue is very, very low. So I don't know what it is. I don't see Purdue making it out of this round. I think North Carolina is going to pull off the upset and beat Purdue, simply because, like, Purdue, they have a lot to lose going into this matchup being the 1 seed. But North Carolina State being the 11th seed, they really have nothing to lose. And there's not as much pressure on them winning as there's pressure on Purdue winning. And I feel like that is the ultimate difference maker for this matchup. And I feel the players on Purdue, they are going to be more prone to collapse under the pressure than North Carolina's roster is, despite the seeding difference. So, next matchup, we have UConn going up against Alabama. And I've said this previously, and I'm going to say it again. UConn is arguably the most complete team going into this tournament, and they've shown that they've been the most complete team in this tournament. They've blown out practically every single opposing team in this tournament, and not a single game against UConn has been competitive. So with that in mind, I feel like this game is going to be a very, very high-scoring game because Alabama's defense is already not that good. And their main highlight is going to be on the offensive side of the ball where they're going to have to score. However, I think UConn's offense is just as good to be able to counter their offense, while at the same time their defense is just that much better. And I feel like Alabama is going to have to play a lot of catch-up going up against UConn in this series. Not this series, in this game, excuse me. I'm used to the NBA being a series. But I feel like Alabama, I think both teams are going to score 100 points. Like, if UConn doesn't blow out Alabama, then both teams are going to score 100 points because Alabama's defense is kind of meh. Like, aside from the second round, Alabama's offense has been doing what it's been doing all season by taking tons of shots that end up going in and playing just enough defense to win. And it's that just enough part that it's not good enough when you're going up against UConn. And Nate Oates, the coach, that's what he's going to want this season. He's going to want the offense to outduel UConn, and I feel like that's a lot of pressure to be able to outduel a good defense while at the same time not having enough defense to stop their offense. And it's a difficult thing to do against this loaded UConn squad. And they've been playing both great defense and great offense. So if Alabama is able to find a rhythm that results in it having another scoring outburst, the issue is going to be playing that catch-up. And Alabama's defense falls apart against UConn's firepower most of the time, and it'll be an exciting game to watch. I fully expect, if it's not going to be a blowout, then it's going to be a very, very high-scoring game for college. There was only one game in the NCAA tournament this year that ended up seeing teams score 100 points, and that was Colorado going up against Florida early in the first round. And with that in mind, I see no surprises if, Alabama is able to score 100 and if UConn is able to score 100. Because if Alabama is able to score 100, then UConn is going to be able to fire back. So I think it's going to be back and forth between both of those guys. But with that, we are out of time for this second segment, so I'm going to go and pivot into the third segment where I talk about NBA basketball and as well as all the NBA games that went down from last night. And we'll talk a little bit about the Warriors because they matched up against the Rockets yesterday, and there's a little bit of drama going on around there. So I'm going to bring that up first right after this short break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we're going to be doing a quick recap of all the NBA games that went down last night. So we're going to start with Warriors going up against Houston because earlier this season, well, not really that much earlier, but like a week ago, when Houston was on a roll and when Houston was winning a bunch of games and they were on that 10-game winning streak, it seemed like they were going to catch up the Golden State Warriors and eventually beat them to the play-in. But ever since then, the standings, they haven't changed at all. The Warriors, they've been winning the important games, and then Houston has sort of cooled off now and is starting to lose all of these important games. And one of the biggest games that they needed to win was going up against the Warriors last night, and they ultimately ended up getting blown out 133-110. And it's really like, it was very, very ironic because there was a player on Houston that was sort of taunting them. He was taunting the Warriors. I'm going to pull up his exact quote real quick. But essentially, he was saying, Warriors come out to play, in a reference to the movie The Warriors. And Draymond Green, he did not like that. Obviously, he did not like being taunted. It was Rockets forward Tari Eason, by the way. He was saying Warriors come out to play, that type of thing on his Instagram. And obviously, the Warriors, they took it personally, especially Draymond Green, who was very quick to talk on his podcast. I'm going to see, do I have the exact quote? No, I don't have the exact quote of what Draymond Green said, but I do know he wasn't happy with being taunted like that. And what he did say after the game, however, because ironically, the forward, Eason, he did not play in that game. And afterwards, Draymond Green said, it's kind of ironic how you say Warriors come out to play when you're sitting on the bench. He was literally sitting on the bench while the Warriors were playing, and he watched the Warriors blow them out. It was not a good matchup, and it was definitely, I think they had it going for them before they started talking, Houston. And them talking just awoke, it opened a spark for the Warriors. Draymond Green, he said, I'm not worried about Houston. And then Houston decides to respond. Now Draymond is going to take it personally, and the rest of the squad is also going to take it personally if Draymond takes it personally. And that's just not a good matchup that's just not something that you want. I have a lot of comments coming in from Carrito. Warriors' new five is with Curry, Clay, Wiggins, Green, TJD, and they're 10th offensively and 3rd defensively. Warriors' old 5 was 7th offensively but 15th defensively. And if I was Steve Kerr, which 5 do I keep out? And I mean, there was really nothing wrong with the first 5 that you just mentioned. Like the first 5 that prioritizes defense, I feel like that's the matchup that that's the lineup that you have to keep out there, because you're going into the playoffs. And when you're going into the playoffs, you need that defense, and you need that. You're going to get production on offense, but you need to make sure that your defense is solid enough to be able to stop the other team, because defense is much more consistent than offense. And when you have good defense, it makes your offense a little bit better, because again, less pressure, less expectations, and that means the offense is just going to get better and better, especially since you can turn defense into good offense. So, and the Warriors, they were really good at doing that. So I think the first lineup that you mentioned is the lineup that they should go with into the playoffs. Now, he also has one more comment here, a realistic what if Jonathan Kuminga does not want to come off the bench and he makes a big drama in the media about it. I do not think he would really have a problem with that if he ends up getting enough minutes, because he's already proven himself to be worthy of starting, and he's already proven himself to Steve Kerr as well. So having Steve Kerr sit him out, I think that would be an insult. Like, not really sit him out, but having him benched, it would really be an insult. So there's nothing wrong with coming off the bench, especially if you can pull off, like, playing 30 minutes coming off the bench or 20 minutes coming off of the bench. I don't think that's a bad thing, especially in terms of a production standpoint for Golden State. But that's just me. So, again, final score, 133-110, and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, they were on fire tonight, 29 points from both of them. And Klay Thompson shot 7 for 11 from 3. Steph Curry shot 2 for 6 from 3. But a win is a win is a win. And it seems that Klay Thompson, he also took it personally. He's got 4 rings. But regardless, like, that was basically like the most anticipated matchup going into last night. 76ers, they matched up against the Heat. Again, Joel Embiid, he did return from his injury. And it ultimately was the deciding factor to them winning this game in the end. Embiid ended up dropping 29 points, and Tyrese Maxey ended up dropping 37 points and 11 assists. They both combined for, let me just do quick math real quick, 66 points. So obviously, like, this duo was very dangerous, and when Embiid was healthy, it was very scary what this team was going to do. Even though, like, I don't think their playoff chances, like, they're going to increase despite this win. I still think this team is going to either just make it to the second round and that's it, or if they match up against Boston, depending on how the seedings go, they're going to lose. So, but regardless, great performance coming in from the Sixers, and not so great performance coming in from the Miami Heat. Jimmy Butler, he played 40 minutes and was only able to get 20 points. And Terry Rozier ended the game with 22 points on 7 for 20 from the field. Bam Adebayo went 6 for 15 for 14 points. So he got ridiculously outdueled by Joel Embiid in that matchup. Hiccups, excuse me. But a lot of the media, they have a lot of faith in this Miami Heat team, and I genuinely do not understand why. I understand they are very good in the postseason, and they always make these crazy postseason runs, but like, what makes us think that they're going to do it again? I don't understand. And now with the standings and how they look, the Heat, they're in the 7th seed. They used to have the 6th seed, but now they have the 7th seed. And it seems like the Sixers, if they're able to keep this winning streak up with Joel Embiid, they might hold that 6th seed and they might go up against the Cavs in the first round. And if they go up against the Cavs in the first round, I have a feeling that the Sixers are going to end up winning against that team. But that's just my thought on that, and those are the possibilities going into the future of, like, what could happen. Now, next game on this list is the Clippers going up against the Denver Nuggets. Now, the Clippers, they ended up winning by 2. This was a very, very important win for the Clippers. They absolutely needed that to sort of keep their confidence going. James Harden, he's sort of been in a weird slump where he's not really shooting the ball that well. He's not really scoring the ball that well, and it was a little bit concerning Paul George wasn't really concerned about it, though, because he was sort of brushing it off. But looking at the box scores, Paul George, he ended the game with 28 points. James Harden ended the game with 20 points on 6 of 23 from the field. So, again, shooting slump really bad. And that was basically it in terms of scoring for the Clippers. They were shorthanded on Kawhi Leonard, and they were still able to beat this Denver Nuggets team without Kawhi, which is a problem if you're the Nuggets. Jokic ended the game with 36, 17, and 10, and he still lost. Again, that is not ideal if you're Denver, especially going into the playoffs, because it just proves the notion that you are indeed beatable, especially to the Clippers. They need that confidence, and you sort of cannot allow the Clippers to gain that confidence or that traction. And again, that was basically all in terms of scoring for the Nuggets. Aaron Gordon, he ended the game with 18 points. KCP ended the game with 16, and Michael Porter Jr. ended the game with 14 on 6 of 18 from the field. So no Jamal Murray in this game, which is probably why they ended up losing. But still, when you have the team has already proven itself to be more than competent to be able to win games without Jamal, as long as Jokic provides and produces on the offensive side. And this was just a really, really bad way to go out for the Denver Nuggets. Now, another game that went down was the Knicks going up against the Kings. The Knicks ended up winning 120-109. And what was really, really good about this win is that they were down by 20. The score was 46-25 with 8 minutes and 39 seconds left in the second quarter, and the Knicks ultimately ended up coming back from this deficit to beat the Kings. And this is without Julius Randle, who I might as well take the time to update everybody on his injury status. He apparently over recovery, while he was recovering, he re-aggravated his injury on his arm, and he tried to avoid surgery, but there was just no going back, and there was no way that he could recover without getting surgery. And that's really bad news coming in for the Knicks. But the fact that they were able to win in this game against a very competent Kings team is definitely a positive going into the playoffs for them. Josh Hart ended the game with 31 points, and Jalen Brunson ended the game with 35 and 11, and DiVincenzo ended the game with 21. So again, the Villanova brothers are going at it, and they are producing for this team. And this is definitely what the Knicks need, since they don't have Julius Randle going into the playoffs. And that was basically all in terms of scoring for this team. And Josh Hart, by the way, he had 31 points, and he did not make a single three-pointer. He had 31 points on 14 of 19 shooting from the field, which is astonishing. And he's very, very valuable to this Knicks team. And honestly, all of those Villanova brothers, they're very valuable to this Knicks team. I hope that the Knicks, they don't break up this team. I hope they don't break up the Villanova boys, because I know they like playing with each other. They've been playing with each other since college, and it's just chemistry just all the way through. It's very nice to see. Now, De'Aaron Fox for the Kings, he ended the game with 29 points. Sabonis ended with another double-double, 17 points and 11 rebounds. And let's see, who else played well? Keegan Murray ended the game with 18 points. And let's see, did Monk play in this game? No, he did not play in this game. So again, it was very, very embarrassing loss for the Kings, especially being up by that much. So they definitely need to tighten up going into the play-in, because they could see themselves losing in the play-in and not even making the playoffs, which would be bad news. Now, the Mavericks, they've been on a roll recently with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, and they ended up winning against the Atlanta Hawks 109-95. Luka ended the game with 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 assists. Kyrie ended the game with 26 points and 5 rebounds and just 1 assist. PJ Washington, he ended the game with 19 points and 8 rebounds. And Derrick Jones Jr. ended the game with 14 points. Daniel Gafford only ended with 6. And again, that was basically it in terms of scoring for the Mavericks. And when you have Luka Doncic on your team, you're ultimately a threat to every single playoff team, especially the Phoenix Suns. So we'll see like how the Mavericks playoff hopes like they play out. It seems that they're going to be playing against the Clippers in the first round, which is not ideal because the Clippers, they have a history of beating Luka Doncic several times. Even if Luka performs and dominates the way he does against the Clippers, it doesn't result in wins. And that's something that this Mavericks team is going to have to overcome going into the postseason. Now, with the Hawks, they've already clinched a play-in spot, and they've already, like, it's set in stone that they're going to match up against the Chicago Bulls because the gap between the Bulls and the Sixers record is like a 5-game difference, and it doesn't really seem like there's going to be much of a changing in the seedings depending on whether they lose out or if they win out. So they matched up against the Mavs, and DeAndre Hunter ended the game with 13 points. Jalen Johnson ended the game with 6 points and 16 rebounds. Bogdanovic ended the game with 17 points and 7 rebounds. And DeJounte Murray ended the game with only 16 points. And obviously, like, that's not enough scoring if you're going up against the Dallas Mavericks. They were not efficient from the field whatsoever. Bogdanovic ended the game shooting 6 of 15. DeJounte Murray ended the game 6 for 17. DeAndre Hunter ended the game 3 for 10. And Jalen Johnson ended the game 3 for 12. So, again, not very efficient scoring coming in from the Hawks. And it's not something that they want going into the postseason, or the play-in tournament, because if they're expected to win out, I don't expect them to win out, and I really don't expect them to win in the play-in, especially with the offensive display that they have. But that's basically it for the NBA recap. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the fourth segment a little bit early, where I'm going to talk about Doc Rivers. I said before that in a previous podcast that I did that I was going to talk about Doc Rivers again once the season concluded and like my overall opinions on him, because I did a prediction before like the Doc Rivers process was going on. And so I'm just going to give everybody an update on where the Bucks are at right now and the Doc Rivers situation. So I will be right back after this short break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we're going to be talking about Doc Rivers and the situation surrounding him and the Milwaukee Bucks. And I bring this up because recently they've lost 2 very easy games for them, and games that they arguably shouldn't have lost, regardless whether they were shorthanded or not. So right now, the Bucks, they're 15-15 with Doc Rivers. That is not good, especially since the Bucks were under Adrian Griffin. They were 30-13 when they were under Adrian Griffin, and the fact that under Griffin they played more games and they were able to still lose less than Doc Rivers, who's only played, like, in comparison, this is 43 games, and with Doc Rivers they've played 30 games. And they were able to get more losses in playing fewer games with Doc Rivers than they were with playing with Adrian Griffin, which continues to beg the question, why on earth did the Bucks bother with bringing Doc Rivers? I don't understand why they even bothered doing that, because, like, it's clearly shown that the value that he brings it's not enough. And it's like he's riding that 2008 championship. Like, that's been the catalyst for his entire career. And I'm sorry to say, but it's like that's not going to be enough for a good coach, in my personal opinion. Like, one championship, and look at the rest of what he's done with his career as a coach. It's really, really bad. And the 2 losses that they just recently had, albeit they weren't at full strength, they lost to tanking teams who are even further away from full strength and have a few, like they have very few options. And somehow, some way, the Bucks find a way to lose. Somehow, some way. And I just don't understand how that's even possible. Because it's like, I'm just going to pull up the stats of the last few games that they've played, just so that way you guys know exactly what teams they matched up against and who they lost to. So they lost to the Wizards, and then they lost to the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies were the most injured team in NBA history, and the Wizards, they've been one of the worst teams in the NBA right now, and they lost to both of them. It's like, how and why? Like, this is not, when you have a prime Giannis and this Bucks squad, that is not something that you're supposed to lose to. And the reason why I'm upset with Doc Rivers is because Doc Rivers throughout his entire career, he's never taken accountability for any of the mistakes that are made, for any of the decisions that he's made. He's never taken accountability once in his entire career. And it hasn't changed here whatsoever. Excuse me. But after losing to Memphis, he had this to say, according to Bleacher Report. Everybody seems happy, except for me. Why even bother saying something like that? Like, yes, everybody's going to seem happy because they're making the playoffs, and except for you. Why are you not happy? But, like, the fact that you even have a job is honestly, like, it should make you happy enough. Now, going more into the quote, Doc Rivers, he said, "I've actually been sitting back and watching everything." So basically, like, no different than what he usually does as a coach. He just sits back and he watches everything. And he said, "Not just our players, but our travel crew. Everything. We don't bring the necessary professionalism, seriousness on the road." That is such a lame excuse for the loss to the Wizards. That is a very, very lame excuse, because it's like, you don't bring that seriousness going on the road. Well, what happened to the seriousness you bring to home court going up against the Grizzlies? And you end up losing there by 111 to 101. They'd lost by double digits, and I understand that they did not have Dame in the lineup, and they didn't have Dame in the rotation, but they still had Giannis, and when you have Giannis and a solid team like the Bucks, there's really no reason for you to be losing to a rebuilding team and a tanking team like Memphis and Washington. No excuse whatsoever, and it just seems like that's what he does every single time. So, the Bucks, I think they're losing in the first round. I'm like, that is my serious low for them. They're going to lose in the first round. They're going to match up against the Pacers, and the Pacers are going to outduel them offensively. And that is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back for Doc Rivers, in my personal opinion. I think that the minute he loses in the playoffs, he is going to get fired immediately. And if he doesn't get fired, it means that they have no other coaches in the position. And I wouldn't be surprised if they fired him, because they just fired Adrian Griffin for literally no reason. They were winning games. It boggles my mind. I think what would really be ironic is if they bring back Adrian Griffin after firing Doc Rivers. That would make me laugh so hard, and I really, really hope that they bring him back, because, again, their record with him was far better, so much better than Doc Rivers' record with this team. And the way that it's like, you can't blame anyone else other than Doc. Like, as much as I want to pin the blame on, like, Damian Lillard for not playing well, or, like, the rest of the team for not playing well, they were doing just fine. even with Dame not playing well under Adrian Griffin, they still were able to find ways to win. And I genuinely feel like that was a result of the coaching, because when you look at what they're doing with Doc, they're doing way worse with him than if they were to do with Adrian Griffin. And it's like, that's too much of a coincidence for the blame to not be on Doc Rivers. That is just way too much of a coincidence. So that's sort of been the update that I wanted to bring. And it's like, it's really not looking good for the Milwaukee Bucks. They match up, I believe they play tonight. Yes, they match up against the Raptors, and they play at home. So if they lose this game, that's a very, very big problem. I mean, I think the problem originally started once they hired Doc, but still, like, this would be a serious, serious problem if they end up losing to the Toronto Raptors. And especially, like, with Philly being on the rise of, like, making the playoffs, it seems more and more likely that the Pacers are going to be the team that they're going to play in the first round. Either that or the Miami Heat. And I think both of those teams, they have a very, very good chance of beating the Bucks. Now, I know I said previously that I don't understand the hype around Miami, but Miami has shocked the Bucks several times. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do it again, especially with Doc Rivers as their head coach. I genuinely would not be surprised if Miami just is able to pull something out and beat the Bucks yet again to make it to the second round. And even if it's not the Heat that's playing the Bucks, the Pacers are the other team that has a good chance of playing the Bucks. And the Pacers, they've owned the Bucks in the regular season, both with and without Adrian Griffin. They're 4-1 going up against the Bucks in the regular season. That is a playoff series right there, being 4-1. And I'm hopeful that they can do it again. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Bucks end up losing in the first round, depending on who they're matched up against. And the farthest I think they'll go is the second round with Doc Rivers. My faith with Doc Rivers is just at an all-time low right now. So that's the update that I have for you with Doc Rivers and that situation. And with that, that is the end of the podcast, and we are out of time for this final segment. So thank you once again for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And I also like to remind everybody to please use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. Once again, that is GSMCPodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. The link is displayed below the ticker. Once again, the link is GSMCPodcast.net. And that is all for the show. Thank you all once again. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn.